All right. I'm your instructor, Mike Augustine, and if you're viewing this video, you should be enrolled in report writing, CJLE 1327. Um, so last week was introduction, look at the syllabus, and have a chance to kind of introduce yourself to the class. This week, we're going to be looking at the components of good report writing. I want you to take a minute and just think to yourself, if I were a police officer, what do I feel would be the components of a good police report? One of the things that you really need to look at and you need to understand, and we'll talk about this more as the course progresses, but whenever you write a report, it is subject to scrutiny from your supervisors, fellow officers. When you're new into police work, it's going to be your field training officer. But one of the things that you need to realize is that when you write these reports, not only might they be public record, but judges are going to read them, lawyers are going to read them, jurors that are sitting in the jury box when cases are tried are going to be reading your reports. So it's really important, and it is essential that you learn how to write reports effectively, convey a message, make sure that it's clear, concise, and we'll get more into that a little bit later. Now for this week's assignment, and I know if you look at the syllabus it may look a bit daunting. I believe that it shows pages 9 through 112. Now the deal is, if you look at this text that we have reported in writing, one of the things that you see as you thumb through the pages is that many of the pages, as you can see here, get that where you can see it, many of the pages have fill in the blanks and exercises and things like that for you to do. That is for your benefit, especially when we talk about the components of good writing, and like last week when we took the pretest. But there are some specific areas that I would like for you to focus on this week as you go through the A to Z. I'm not requiring you, or I'm not even asking you to memorize everything on page 9 through 112 for this week. But what I would like you to do is I would like for you to focus on some specific areas that are in the A to Z. For example, report writing rules on page 11. I would like for you to look at that. Make sure that you understand that. If you'll look down, chronological order. Now, chronological order means, I'll give you an example. An offense report narrative may say something like, on February the 18th, 2016, I, and in parentheses I would usually put my name, arrived at the scene. Now there are some different schools of thought about whether we should write in first person and write in third person. Personally, me, I do not like third person. Some departments require it. I don't know why. It's confusing. You forget, start using the wrong pronouns and you go back and forth. So if you just write it in the first person and basically convey a message and tell a story, it's much easier to keep up with, in my opinion. Now, having said that, when you go to work for a department, whatever your department policy is, and especially whatever your FTO tells you to do, that's what you need to do. But anyway, writing chronologically, going back to what I was saying, on February the 18th, 2016, I, name in parentheses, Officer John Doe, whatever the case may be, arrived at the scene, or arrived at, and then you would put an address. Basically what I'm driving at is that when you write a report and you do it chronologically, as you do that, you talk about what happened when you got there, what you observed, who you spoke with, what they said. And the thing about chronological writing, even though you're going to be telling a story about your actions once you arrive at a call or a crime scene, whatever the case may be, you're also going to write chronologically within your chronological order. And what I mean by that is if someone's telling you a story, more than likely they are going to say, well, I did this and I did this. And if you look at the way that you question people when you're writing reports, oftentimes you're going to say things like, and then what happened? And then what happened? Try not to be leading when you do that, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later as the course progresses. But we're going to look at chronological order. Fact versus opinion. Basically, your job when you arrive at the scene is to record the facts that are present when you're conducting your investigation or whatever. There aren't many times when your opinion is going to have any weight when it comes to evidence that's gathered or the trying of a case or anything like that. The thing about it is you record the facts. You may end up on a call or doing a particular investigation and you think, I've got this guy, I know this is the guy that did it. Figuratively speaking. However, when you're at the scene and you're writing that report, there may be some things that are exculpatory for the suspect, defendant, whatever terminology you care to use, and that has to be documented. You know, there are people in law enforcement that are going to tell you, if you ask anybody that's been doing this job for any amount of time, yeah, I thought this guy did it, but as the investigation progressed, I learned that he did not. So even if anything is in there that may seem exculpatory, make sure that you document everything that goes into that report. That's crucial and very important. You want to make sure that you put the facts in there, not your opinion. Now, you will put other things that people say that you'll get third party, but then there are certain legal ramifications with regard to hearsay evidence, but basically that's the kind of stuff that lawyers work out when they get ready to try cases in the courtroom, prosecution and the defense. So those are some different things that you'll need to look at as well. Let's look down here, proofreading your report. If we'll look on page, looks like page 61, which is part I, that's another area that I want you to focus on. Listen, when you proofread your report, it's going to make you a better writer. How many times do you type something, a text message, you send it, after you send the text message, you're like, oh, well, I meant to say, right? It happens. So it's always a good idea for you to proofread your report before you submit it to your supervisor, your FTO, whomever, okay? Very important. When you're proofreading your reports, obviously you're going to look for grammar and things of that nature, but the most important thing is you want to make sure that it makes sense, that it's clear, that it's concise, that it makes sense to you. If you need to go back in and you've used pronouns and what have you, you might want to use proper names to ensure that there's not any confusion or anything like that. Those are some of the things that you need to look at when you're writing a good report. Look at part K, the report writing shoulds, the things that you should do and things that you should check on to make sure that you're clear on those as well. Note taking, if we look in part L, we're talking about note taking during this module. When you take notes, you want to make sure that when you take notes that they make sense to you and that you can read your notes. If you need to use a voice recorder or if you have some type of handheld device where you can do your note taking or whatever the case may be, that's fine. But I will just tell you from firsthand experience, I've been to calls and what have you, written notes down, excuse me, was in a hurry, wrote those things down, and then I had to go back because I couldn't read my own handwriting. That's pretty bad. And when I say go back, I don't mean go back in my memory and try to remember. I'm talking about actually have to go back to a scene and ask somebody, I'm sorry, what did you say? I didn't get that down, what I actually did. But if I can't read it, there's really no point in even saying that, I got the information, because I don't. All right, let's move on and look at some of the other topics that we're going to cover. Excuse me. Part M, organizing the report, how you want to write your report, things of this nature. That's very important as well. One of the things that you want to do when you write your report with regard to organization, you want to make sure that it is clear, it's concise, that it makes sense, that you're able to go to certain reports. There's a local agency here, and they've done it for years. At the end of their narratives, many times what they'll do is they'll go ahead and they'll list the suspects, the witnesses, the victims, anything like that, and they'll put their contact information, and then there's just a little synopsis below their name or over to the side, and basically it says John Doe can testify to, and it gives a little brief synopsis about what they observed, and it makes it much easier for someone who's reading a report to go back and look at that, and then because there's specific information that they're going to be looking for. I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. You know, you read reports, and this is just an example. You know, a lot of reports, they have fill in the blank. You know, like witness A, instead of putting somebody's name. And then when you get to the narrative part of the report, it'll say witness A saw suspect 1 pick up the pistol and shoot victim 1 in the head. Well, then you go back and you're like, well, who in the hell is witness A? Because it's just not in there, because they filled out the little blank and then they didn't put the information in the report. That goes back to note taking, because there are going to be times that you may have a prosecutor that calls you and says, hey, you talked about this guy, but there aren't any particulars in there. So you want to organize your report. The other thing that you want to do is, look, here's the deal. If you take information from a person as you're getting their info and you're writing this report, and they tell you that their address is room number 9 at the Fleabag Motel. Listen, I'm telling you, a year to 18 months when we go back to get ready to try that case, they're not going to be in room number 9 at the Fleabag Motel. That is not an address. That's why it's very important that you get information like a nearest relative, maybe a cell phone number of someone else other than them, because a lot of the people that you're going to deal with are going to be transient, so to speak, you know, nomadic almost. So they don't stay in one place very often. Oftentimes what they'll do is they'll crash at somebody's house or whatever, sleeping on a couch, stay in a motel somewhere or whatever, and they're moving around all the time. So it's very important that you have some other contact information where someone will be able to contact, be it an investigator, detective, prosecutor, whomever. So, or even you, because you may need to go back and follow up on the information that you gather. It's really important. All right, let's look at some of the other topics that we might that we're going to cover this week. Organization and description. One of the things that I do at the academy is I'll have someone walk into the classroom while I'm teaching and just say something like, hey, Augustine, that item that you needed taken care of, they called about that. And I'll say, thank you. They'll walk out of the room, and I'll wait about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll say, hey, remember that person that came into the classroom? Write down what they looked like. When that happens, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe the varying descriptions that I get. You know, it was a Hispanic female. We're talking about the same person here. It was a Hispanic female. No, she was Asian. She had blonde hair. No, she had dark hair. She was wearing a floral pattern shirt. No, she was wearing a plain, you know, black shirt. She had on capri pants. She had on blue jeans. I think you kind of get the idea. She was 5'4". No, she was 5'9". You know, and then after that's over with, I'll bring the person back in, and then they can see. And I can tell you right now, oftentimes eyewitness testimony, it stinks. Okay, if anytime you get eyewitness testimony, you better make damn sure that you go out and you corroborate what that eyewitness saw. It's very important. There's a comedian that says, yeah, I'm about 6'3". Of course, it depends on what convenience store I'm leaving, you know, talking about the marks that are on the doors as you leave. But, you know, there's a lot of validity and there's a lot of truth to that. So you want to make sure that you write good reports and that the information that you have in these reports is accurate. as accurate as you can get, either for yourself or from other witnesses. Interviewing skills and report writing. A lot of people think that, well, you know, interviewing is for people that are detectives and investigators and that kind of stuff. Look, you're going to do interviewing and you're going to take statements from people out on the street all the time. Excuse me, that's just one of the things that you're going to be required to do. So you have to be able to build rapport, and you're going to have to be able to learn how to interview. And basically, the bottom line is you got to learn how to talk to people. And those are some other strategies that are mentioned in here. So I want you to focus on that as well. The CPR of report writing: courtesy, professionalism, and respect. I'd like for you to read that. That's on page 102. Establishing rapport on 103. And then if you will, move down to when to write a report. You know, oftentimes I think as police officers, a lot of times we're guilty of putting as much effort into not writing a report when it would have been better if we just would have gone ahead and written a report in the first place. Different departments have different policies concerning when to write a report, when you have to write a report, when you don't. When I was at a local police department here, if we went and answered alarm calls, you know, you could just clear it through dispatch. You didn't have to write a report. There were other agencies, if you went to an alarm call, you had to take a report. So, I mean, it's going to vary. Whatever your department policy dictates, that's what you're going to do. And even though you're taking this course, one thing I want to make clear is that anything that I tell you as part of this course as a strategy for report writing or whatever, your department policy supersedes anything that I tell you. All right? And your FTO, when you get out on the street and you're in training, that supersedes anything that anybody tells you, because that's what you're going to have to do. That's who you're going to have to get past to further your career in law enforcement. The 4 C's, and I want to make sure I get this right, so I'm going to turn the page right quick. It's on page 108 of your text. Page 108, want to make sure that your report is clear, it's concise, it's complete, and it is correct. And that's pretty much what I want you to look at this week with regard to, you know, and I'm sure maybe you're a little bit, you know, taken aback when you see page 9 through 112. But these are the areas that I want you to focus on. Talking about your report being correct, I can tell you right now from personal experience, there is no worse feeling in the world than sitting on, well, it ranks up there with feelings, but sitting on in a witness stand, knowing that there's something in that report that you forgot to document, and having to sit there and have a defense attorney rake you over the coals. It is not a good feeling. You're sitting there thinking, man, I just want to get off this witness stand. I mean, it's bad. When I was a rookie officer, happened to me the first time I ever testified in district court. I'd been to traffic court and things like that before, but this was on a pretty serious case. And there were some things that I did at the scene, but I didn't document it in my report. And I can tell you right now, if it's not in your report, it did not happen. Did not happen. You know, so that's a mistake that I learned from. You know, I joke sometimes and say that, you know, after that, if I was taking a report and I heard a dog bark off in the distance, I would write, while I was talking to the witness, a dog barked in the distance. So I'm not, you know, obviously you don't need to be that specific, but even things that you don't think are important, they may be later on. And so you're going to be asked about that question. So I want to leave you with this for this assignment for this week. I want you to start thinking about when you write a report. I want you to try to put yourself in the position of a defense attorney. It worked for me. If I get into court, what are some questions I might be asked? Not just by the defense attorney, but what are some questions that the prosecutor is going to ask me? You know, things like venue. I mean, if you put in your report, I was dispatched to the scene, and you don't put the address or anything like that in there, then we don't even know where it happened. So those are some things that you know, and I know it seems obvious, but sometimes they get left out of reports. That's why things like proofreading and all that are very important, Okay, so that's kind of what I want to leave you with, just kind of, give you an idea of what I'm going to be looking for this week as you read and go through that. Now, some of the in the book there are some scenarios. If you look for police officers, and I think it says police and probation officers and things like that, what I would like for you to do is read some of those scenarios and just kind of do those exercises and write some of that stuff down. It's going to help you later on when we actually do our scenarios when we're that you'll be graded on later on in the course. So if you can kind of get into that habit now, it's going to help you later on. But go through this, and there'll be further instructions in your modules. Be sure to read those carefully, and there are probably going to be some discussion board entries that I'm going to want you to make to discuss this. And I think that if we can do that, I think that it's going to help us get in that habit of writing and things like that, and other people to be looking at it, give us a chance to kind of peer review one another. So anyway, that's what I'd like for you to do this week. Kind of go through that, the A through Z's, just hitting on those topics that I covered, looking over those, and I'll be asking you to discuss those this week. Have a great week.